oh, wow, actually, you don't understand a lot of things that are going on. Your accent isn't as good as you thought. I kind of turned that frustration and an experience like that into motivation. When I first moved to Mexico City a couple years ago, my girlfriend, had said to me, she's like, oye, pero tú tienes como un acento como norteño, como hablas como norteño, like I have that kind of, like, I don't know, whatever.
Now you sound like a real chilango now that you're in Mexico City.
Yeah.
And
Hola, ¿qué tal? Today we're going to talk with Nate from Spanish with Nate. We are going to talk about what he did to learn fluent Spanish before he ever moved to a Spanish-speaking country. We're also going to talk about some of the things he did to develop such a native-sounding Mexican accent in Spanish. And we're going to talk about some of the things that he would, looking back on more than 10 years of learning Spanish, some of the things that he would maybe do a little bit differently. Empecemos.
Hola a todos, ¿qué tal? Welcome, Nate, from Spanish with Nate.
Muchas gracias. Hola, chicos.
So for anybody who doesn't know Nate, he's got a really awesome channel on YouTube here called Spanish with Nate. And Nate, I would love for you to tell us a little bit about yourself and your background with Spanish.
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, everyone. My name's Nate. I am from Southern California. I moved to Mexico City a couple years ago. So now I live here. I started learning Spanish in high school 10 years ago, so I've been learning for 10 years now. And yeah, I make videos speaking with people, speaking with cool people like Connor, and yeah, everything's Spanish. I love Spanish. It's awesome.
One thing that I think is pretty interesting about your story is that you learned the vast majority of your Spanish before you ever moved to Mexico, before you ever moved to a Spanish-speaking country. And I know a lot of people are trying to do something like that, but it's kind of challenging. So I'm curious if you had any tips or any advice you could share from your own experience.
Sure. Yeah, it's a great question. And a lot of people, want to know, Nate, how did you get fast quickly and all that? A huge thing is that I'm from Southern California. We have so many Spanish speakers. In fact, where I'm from in Southern California, I'm actually a minority. The majority is actually Latinos where I'm from. So that was a huge factor. Also, I think, even though there were lots of Latinos around me, I wouldn't have necessarily learned if I didn't kind of make it a point to actually try and practice with random people, friends, people in the community. For me, I was just kind of fearless, didn't really care. I made mistakes, looked silly, kind of made a fool of myself all the time. But, slowly but surely, then, I stopped making as many mistakes. I started to have a better accent and things like that. So I think it was I was really lucky because I had lots of people to practice with. It was more so just making sure that I was actually speaking with them and not being, too afraid and shy and unconfident to actually go up to someone and say, hey, I heard you speaking Spanish. I'm learning. Can I practice with you? That kind of took me a bit to build up that confidence and do that. But yeah, I think having a lot of Latinos around me was a huge, huge benefit.
Did you ever, try to speak and get frustrated by it not going smoothly or by people, replying in English when you tried to speak Spanish and things like that?
Absolutely. I think it's interesting. For me, I kind of took my frustration and turned it into motivation. I remember I had been learning Spanish for 4 years, and I took this awesome trip to Aguascalientes, which is a kind of a very central state here in Mexico. I went with my best friend Luis. At this point, I'm thinking my Spanish is awesome. I'm the best Spanish speaker ever, whatever. I go there, and I have a very rude awakening. I get slapped in the face by reality of basically being like, oh, wow, actually, you don't understand a lot of things that are going on. Your accent isn't as good as you thought. I kind of turned that frustration and an experience like that into motivation. I was like, okay, I'm frustrated. I don't know how to say things. In fact, I always tell people, when I first started learning, if I didn't have anyone to practice with, oftentimes I'd be in the shower, sitting on the toilet and just talking to myself like a crazy person. Gosh, how would I say that? I don't know. Let me look. That, that process definitely helped me learn a lot of new vocabulary and all that. When it comes to people replying to me in English, when I was trying to speak in Spanish with them, I think the number one thing is that people hear your accent. I know you talk a lot about, perfecting your pronunciation. I agree. It's absolutely essential to get a good pronunciation in Spanish because it's not necessarily that you have a bad level per se. It's oftentimes because your accent is very clearly foreign, and so people are like, oh, he probably speaks English, I'll just speak to him in English. But I think once you really get that accent down and you combine that with knowing how to use the grammar and all that, then people are like, oh, cool, this guy speaks good Spanish, let's go.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that makes such a big difference. And in terms of that, and also just giving you more confidence to use the language.
Totally.
One thing I was looking at some of the comments on your videos, and people were all congratulating you and applauding your accent. Now you sound like a real Chilango now that you're in Mexico City. And I was curious, you've obviously put a lot of work into or put a lot of focus maybe into your own pronunciation and your own accent. I was curious if you had any tips or things that you've done in particular that really helped you with that.
Yeah, good question. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's crazy now to think that people are like, oh, I thought you were Mexican. Like, it's crazy because 4 years ago when I started filming these videos, these YouTube videos, whatever, I look at my accent and my Spanish and like, it was okay. But now, like, when someone's like, dude, if I heard you on the street and I didn't know you're American, I would think you're Mexican. Like, that is like crazy. I can't believe it. I think number one thing is time. It took time to get here. But the other thing is speaking a lot. And also I think environment is key. Being from Southern California, we have a lot of Mexican Spanish speakers. So I was constantly hearing Mexican Spanish, not only just in conversation, but also on the radio and listening to music and, consuming media and things like that. So I think just kind of constantly being in that environment really helped me a lot. And it's so funny because when I first moved to Mexico City a couple years ago, my girlfriend, had said to me, she's like, oye, pero tú tienes como un acento como norteño, como hablas como norteño, like I have that kind of, like, I don't know, whatever. Cause, I was coming from SoCal, I was listening to lots of, kind of groups like Intocable, Pesado, kind of these like northern Mexican groups. But now it's so funny because I'm getting all these comments on my videos recently where it's like, dude, now you sound like a Chilango. And I'm like, oh man, I kind of like my norteño thing. But the number one thing though, I would say like number one fundamental thing for those who are trying to improve their accents is focus on the vowel sounds. Number one, most important thing is focus on the vowel sounds. It's a dead giveaway when someone doesn't use the vowel sounds properly, but it's the easiest thing to get down. Like, a, e, I, o, u. If you can just slow down your speaking and every single word you say, really focus on the vowel sounds, I guarantee you, your accent is going to sound 10 times better. I mean, it's just so simple, but it really does help.
I love that tip. Speaking slow, it's, we try to speak this new language at the same speed that we speak our first language. And when you don't have the vocabulary and everything else yet, it's really, really hard. You end up getting tongue-tied, and then your pronunciation kind of falls apart because you're trying to do too many things at once. But when you slow down, first of all, you don't usually sound as slow as you think you sound. And second of all, it just gives you a bit more time to think and really focus on those sounds. That's a really great tip.
Totally. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you've been learning for quite a while now. And at this point, like you said, there's a lot of times when people think that you're, not from the US, that they think you're from Mexico. And so I guess from a lot of people's perspective, you've kind of arrived to the point where a lot of people would like to be in their Spanish. You've been doing this for a long time. Is there anything different, anything that you would do different from, looking back on your 10-ish plus years of learning Spanish? Is there anything that you would do different that would maybe have sped up the process or made it simpler or helped you avoid certain mistakes that held you back?
I think the two things would be I would have started listening to music from day one. I didn't start listening to music in Spanish probably like 2 or 3 years into the learning process. Why? I don't know. Maybe I just didn't think about it. That's one. I think that helped me a lot with my accent. It's just, like I said, the environment, just constantly hearing. I mean, as you know, right, when we're little babies, we are only listening for a couple years, and then finally we kind of sputter some things out, and then, a few years later, then it kind of starts making sense. I would have started listening to music from day one, like you were talking about in the video we filmed on my channel. Focusing on things you like, focus on music you like, focus on podcasts you like, things like that. And the next is just speaking more. I was speaking a decent amount, but I think I could have done a lot better job speaking because, for example, when I started filming YouTube videos about 4 years ago, almost 5 now, I was doing so much more speaking with just random people from all over the world online. And that really did help my Spanish a lot. So I think speaking from day one, speaking a lot and listening to music every day.
Mm-hmm. And maybe finding a thing that pushes you to speak like you found with your channel.
Totally. Absolutely.
Well, that's all the questions I got. Muchas gracias, Nate, por estar en el canal. Y sí, nos vemos pronto.
Sí, está bien. Gracias, chicos. Bye.
Chao.